Why runes suck? The problem with Death Knight. Hey everyone, Death Knight has now been out for half a year, and I would like to discuss some of the big issues with the rune system. This post is going to be critical of DK as it stands right now, so I'd like to preface this by saying that while I think the overall design of Death Knight isn't in a great spot, this does mean that I think the class is worthless. Sorry, what? This does not mean I think the class is worthless, and I certainly do not think it's unsalvageable. In fact, if there's one saving grace of how bad runes are, it's easy how they are scrap altogether. Plenty of people play and enjoy a variety of Death Knight decks. It clearly appeals to many people. Part 1, 3 subclasses. I like it. Okay, I think it's a pretty interesting class. I like the way that they did the rune system, but I can understand why people wouldn't like it because it is very, very hard to build decks for, right? But let's see what this person says. So part 1, 3 subclasses stacked on top of each other and wearing a trench coat. The first main point is that DK is designed such that it will probably continue to be that read like I'm signing a contract. A collection of 3 subclasses that do not interact with each other. Okay, I agree with this though. I agree with this. Like triple frost cards, you can't really interact with anything else, right? So you're forced to build it with triple frost, which makes it unfortunate because it's like the cool thing about Death Knight could be like 2 frost, 1 blood, but you still get powerful effects. But it feels like if you're not going all in for like one specific rune, you're kind of like gimping yourself in terms of damage, right? Or like overall winning ability. The idea behind the rune system makes it some kind of sense as a cool gimmick. It appears be that by gating cards from being played with each other, the big payoffs can be made stronger and interesting decisions can be made during deck building. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. What cards do you give up access in order to access others? What cool combos can you make? It's compelling in theory. Okay, fair enough. The first major problem though is that the system strongly encourages you going fully into each rune. Yes, so like that's what I just said, right? Like the payoffs aren't there if you're not going all the way into the rune system because it feels like you're just not doing enough as the class. So I 100% agree with that actually. 100%, yeah. You can see that's how it's played already. Since DK launched, all cross rune decks have been dead on arrival. Yeah, and there's been exactly 3 viable functional DK decks: Pure Blood, Pure Frost, and Pure Unholy. There kind of was like Rainbow for a little bit there, but like was Rainbow the reason why you're playing it or was it because of the location, right? It's tough. It's tough. 2 factors both push this to be the case. The first is that each rune is strongly focused on a different fundamental approach to Hearthstone. These approaches don't intersect very much. Blood is mostly control, Frost is burn aggro, and Unholy is minion aggro. So you're making your rune choice while deck building, and that choice is basically, do I get a big payoff cards for my strategy, or do I instead take some generically good cards for another rune? Like sure, Noxus Cadaver would be kind of cool in my Unholy deck, but it's not exactly better than Bloodlust, is it? They're not wrong. Yo, Benji, thanks for the Prime sub, bro. The rune system is trying to emulate how mana bases work in MTG. Doesn't work good on a class-based game such as Hearthstone. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. We'll see though. Hold on. Let's see what this guy's saying. Nor am I convinced that Blood DK players are itching to Nor am I convinced that Blood DK players are feeling the itch to drop their Soul Stealers and Vampiric Bloods to pick up Remorseless Winter. Yeah, like generally speaking, like that's what the main point of this whole thing is, right? Like if you don't go triple blood, what is the point of actually building a Death Knight deck? Because it feels like you're losing so much of a payoff. It's interesting. The second factor is oh my god. The second factor is the idea of designing 3 rune cards as a push payoff cards. Literally by design, triple rune cards are usually stronger and more impactful than 1 rune cards. Sure, there's less of them, 3 rune cards per color rather than about 12 single rune cards. But Hearthstone decks are limited in size, so what makes them good is usually running the good cards. Yes, good cards at Hearthstone are good. When it comes to deck building, having access to more mediocre cards will likely never be more meaningful than having fewer stronger cards. So this is always a false choice. 100%. He's right. Yo, Zemerus, thank you for the sub, bro. I appreciate it. Like, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. It's a self-feeding problem too. In order to make each rune functional to encourage people to play the big, exciting payoff cards, each rune needs to have the necessary tools to do the one thing it does well. And since any triple rune deck has all the tools it wants to do, it is even less encouraged to branch out and take supporting cards from another rune. And of course, with each subclass pool being relatively small, each card slot is precious, which has its number of implications. Okay, so like, how many times, chat, for people who like build decks, how many times have you guys actually tried to build like a cross rune deck and then you look at it and go like, it looks like big poo? Has anyone done that? Probably happens more often than not, right? People are like, oh, I wish I can combine like my blood package with frost, and then you realize, oh shit, it's absolutely trash. So what's the point of playing it? So I understand this problem. So like in deck building, I think this is a way bigger issue, but in reality, like when you're doing gameplay, I don't think this is really hindering how Death Knight plays to an extent, right? I guess if you really want to try some interesting decks, this is like a bigger problem. But for most people, I feel like as long as they're a functional like deck to play with each rune type, I think it's fine. But we'll see. What happens when 10 cards per set need to carry 3+ classes? Okay, so this is actually a way bigger deal, right? Because if you look at the current state of Death Knight and how it is printed, like they have to give support. They have to give support to every single rune system now. So they can't just print like only blood for an expansion. They have to give it to every single rune. But if you compare it to something like Warlock, right? Like I'll go to, let's go to like Festival of Legends, right? Warlock gets just cards, and then those cards can be put into anything, where Death Knight doesn't have that luxury anymore, right? Because they have to build around it. There are a couple neutral cards, but like this card is, how is this card going to be played if there's not a more support for Frost and Unholy, right? Which means that on arrival, there's a lot more cards in the expansion that are just unplayable for Death Knight. So I can understand that. Okay, maybe the third rune system being 3 distinct and gated subclasses isn't actually that big of a problem. It's not. It is not. This is definitely semantics. Let's put a pin in that for now and now look at the more immediate issue. Team 5 has designed Death Knight in a way that makes their jobs a lot harder in the future. Each class gets 10 plus some from the mini set cards per set. These cards are usually a span of range of identities, archetypes, directions, often 2 or 3 cards per set. Sometimes a class gets a card which can span multiple archetypes and prop up the entire class, or neat synergistic classes which aren't obviously powerful but open up possibilities that wouldn't otherwise exist. Even with all this and with all the possibilities of cards that interact with each other in interesting ways, Team 5 often struggles to make class have multiple options and adopt new strategy in a meaningful update. I mean, I don't think this is necessarily true. It's just like the powerfulness of cards is just generally not super high for them to push archetypes that they don't want to. Sometimes it's just like a card design issue, but for the most part, like it's not that big of a deal. It's not easy to try and pushing things in new directions while ensuring a class is viable. I agree with that 100% though. Like it is difficult to come up with a new thing for a class and have it work and be successful, right? Like it probably takes multiple iterations, but I'm trying to think of like a really good example of it. Because the benefit of like classic Hearthstone is that they had time to build classic before it ended up being like a real game for players to try. With each expansion, they have like what? Probably a year max, and then they still have to work on the next expansion after. It's really interesting. Okay. Meanwhile, Death Knight on average is spinning this card pool across 3 subclasses with so many fewer card slots to work with. It's basically impossible to fully support all 3 in a set. Yes, 100% agree with that. Festival tried to provide interesting new cards and dimensions to Blood and Unholy and left Frost with basically nothing. Hold on. Did I get rid of that page? Okay, what do we got here? So they left Frost with basically nothing. What did Frost get? Frost got this card for 1. Oh my God, they're right. Wait, Frost got Frost got nothing, dude. He's right. Frost got like 1 card. Well, 2 cards, I guess. Well, I mean, like the neutrals don't really count, but oh my God, I didn't even realize he's right. I didn't even realize. That's actually crazy. What the hell? They got like nothing. Damn, dude. That's I didn't even realize. Okay, what was I reading? The hell was I reading? Chat, where's I reading? Oh yeah, I see. Okay, left Frost. Unholy also ended up getting nothing because the few cards it didn't work out because most of them tried to support something that isn't what the main triple Unholy deck is doing. Okay, let me check this out again. Hold on. So it only got Bone Shredder. Chat, have you guys ever seen Bone Shredder get played? I'm gonna be honest, I kind of forgot this card existed. Another strength of the classic format means escaping Demon Hunters. True. Maybe that's the plan, is they focus on 2 runes per set. Each rune will give 2 sets per year. I don't know. It does seem tough. Like in theory, it's tough. Right? I'm someone who like actually thinks the rune system is a really interesting idea. Like I kind of like it, but I can understand the idea that if you're not going triple rune, like you're kind of just making yourself a worse deck, right? Which is unfortunate because it would be cool to do like 2 blood, 1 frost, right? But how broken would that be? Because they clearly balanced in around 3. It's extremely notable how little Frost and Holy decks have changed since March of the Lich King. Most of them have adopted some new neutrals. Meanwhile, Blood actually got some new solid cards, but it still doesn't feel different because its new cards simply support exactly what. Okay, So, I mean, I'm gonna be real here, bro. Death Knight's been out for 2 expansions. Like, do you expect it to be drastically different? Let me keep on reading. In the future, it'll be Blood or Unholy that gets no new toys to play with because there wasn't room in the set. Yes, 100%. Hey, Regal, what's up, dude? Our babies are with us today and they're very disruptive. Wait, what babies? What are you talking about? Is this J Alex reading? No, it's some other guy. Oh, and the problem is actually worse than it looks. You see, a set isn't just trying to support 3 DK archetypes, it's trying to support more. Card slots for each rune are torn between providing meaningful additions to what the rune does and trying to fill out the fantasy containing multiple identities and archetypes by supporting some alternative ideas in each rune. Hand buff gets a card, death rattle combo gets a card. Meanwhile, the decks that actually have what they need to function stay relatively static. Yeah, okay. I hope you like seeing unchanged decks between expansions. It's going to be happening a lot more with runes holding back DK decks from developing. Chat, do you think that the way that they designed Death Knight is going to make it so it's not an interesting class in a year? What do you guys think? It's like if you play Mage and you have to choose between Frost, Arcane, and Fire spells. That's why I'm more interested in Rainbow DK but still feel bad because you can't really get big. Yeah, I understand that logic, man. Yeah, I understand. Yes, not at all. Yeah, no, I think it'll be fine. Like, I think that Death Knight they need to, basically what they need to do, without continuing reading, we're gonna continue reading this, but let me give you an example. Like, let me get, or I need like a rainbow. Okay, so let's look at this card. The problem with this card is that building a deck that is 1 blood, 1 frost, and 1 holy is usually giga trash. But if the payoff is worth it, which this is not, don't try to cope your way through. This is not a good payoff. If the payoff is worth it and you actually had a legitimate win condition, I can see it actually working out. They need a card like Zephyrus to kind of come in and be this effect. Like Highlander did not work unless they had a payoff, right? So as soon as Reno came into the game, there was a payoff for the deck. And then they printed Kazakus, they printed a bunch of other cards. Like Rainbow Death Knight needs a payoff. They need a bigger payoff than this. This isn't it. This is not it. It's too slow. So too slow. All right. Okay, where was I saying? All right. But we can't forget the promise of the rune system. One of the reasons it's actually cool is that we can blend runes, right? Yeah, absolutely. Surely something is happening there. Well, since it's not going to happen naturally, other card slots need to be devoted to propping up that fantasy that cross rune archetypes actually exist. So we get Dead Air, an interesting card with an arbitrary restriction that means it can't be played in majority of DK rune combos. Or we get a pretty neat DK Colossal, which I've seen more from other classes generating it than I've seen DK because it has a Blood and Frost. This is straight facts. This is straight facts. An interesting Blood and Frost does not exist as a deck or even the idea of a deck. Or we get Necrotic Explosion, an interesting payoff card to the real DK mechanic corpses, but one which cannot be playable because it's locked for many of the most powerful corpse-related cards in the game. Yeah, see, like, that's basically gonna say. Like, the problem with this card is the payoff just isn't there for an effect like this. This is too rough. And I didn't even consider like most of the cards that are needed to spend corpses just don't fit into a deck like this. So that's really, really interesting. Okay. For real, someone explain to me how it makes sense that Necrotic Explosion and Corpse Giant / Plague Grain cannot be put into the same deck. That's like saying I can't play King Crush and Stranglehorn Heart together. It's insanity. But Highlander neutral supported all classes. You could easily drop a bunch of Highlander support as a part of an expansion for DK. You have to dedicate an entire DK release to Rainbow. No, I don't disagree with that at all, right? But my point of the Highlander thing was like Highlander wasn't a real deck until they had a payoff, right? Like the introduction of Zephyrus made decks want to be a Highlander deck because Zephyrus was so fucking powerful, right? So if Rainbow Death Knight had an actual payoff other than this card right here, it might actually be playable. But like this isn't it. It needs a card that's like something insane. I don't know how to describe it. Like I'm not a designer, right? So part 3, why can't I make cool decks with fun cards? That's Hearthstone, baby. Let me examine that actually. Hinting the right design with legendary isn't easy, but the last 3 DK legendaries are all dead unplayable cards and none of them need to be. K-Chat is the top end to a neat DK strategy that sucks because runes stop it from accessing the support cards it needs to make for a functional deck. For example, a K-Chat combo deck could really use some blood cards to help slow the game down. Sindragosa is a perfectly fine card that you're literally not allowed to play in any good decks. That's true. Necrotic Explosion could make for a fun top end of a corpse deck running the plentiful corpse support in the class, but you're not allowed to include it in a deck with the cards that support it. True. True. As soon as Zephyros and Reno rotated out, Highlighters rotated. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. We're gonna have to wait for DK to have at least 4 expansions of cards. Yeah, and I also think that's the case, right? We're gonna have to see what like a 4 expansion Death Knight looks like, right? We've only seen it with 2 expansions so far. So it'll be interesting to see what it looks like after the next expansion and the expansion after that. Plus the mini set cards, right? Problem is you can still play strong cards in Highlander while Rainbow DK has almost no other good cards. Yeah, but like they haven't made the strong cards is basically the point of getting at, right? Like there's no strong rainbow cards, it seems like. So they need to make stronger cards. Like Hearthstone archetypes, dude, are literally built on just having a stronger card in the system, right? Decks are not formed until a card is made for the deck, right? Is there an example I can show you in Festival of Legends? Hold on. Like what expand, like what card? Hold on. Let me see this shit. Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's an example. Festival may not be a good representation of this, right? Yeah, quests are a good example, actually. Quest is a really good example, right? Also, like this card, right? Enraged Warrior was a decent deck, but like this card amplified it quite a bit because it's just a really, really good card. Yeah, it's kind of like think about Guff, right? Guff is insane. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, right? Yo, War Piece, thanks for subbing too, bro. I appreciate that, guys. Thank you so much. Okay, all right. Where was I, sir? Oh yeah, I take a moment to ask you, are the restrictions imposed by runes making this class more fun? Is it opening possibilities? I see a disturbing number of cards that aren't playable, not because they are bad, but because arbitrary restrictions stop cards from accessing their own strategy. Imagine this stuff in other classes. Decks are fun to build when you have a lot of different toys to play with and have to work out how they fit them together. And Rage Warrior is a great example. Dude, I just talked about this. Did I write this article? Jesus. It currently uses Rage cards, Fire cards, Rifts, and more. Yeah, like that's a good point. Yeah. It's a cool list that took a lot of time to refine and has a lot of cool internal interactions. Now, imagine if Sun Fury Champion had 2 Fire runes, while Imbued Axe had 2 Angry Face runes. Would the class be more fun for being forced into an only Enrage or only Fire? Even if Olgra and Thor Balor each got +1/+1 to compensate, Warrior right now is fun to build decks for, and it is fun to play because there's a lot of strong stuff in the class after all the buffs, and you get to do whatever you like with it. A card like Ambers of Strength isn't particularly interesting, but when it comes to interacts with Sun Fury, Thori, Anima Extractor, and Imbued Axe and other cards, it becomes a lot more so. 100%. 100%. The only Necro need is a good card that uses corpses. Yeah. I imagine if they print a couple really good double rune cards for each rune, we'll see more viable combinations. Yeah, 100% agree with that. But we'll have to wait and see. And you can see the other side of the coin with DK. A relatively common sentiment has been that DK is kind of a boring as a class. It doesn't feel especially nuanced. I think this will continue because synergy is what makes cards and classes fun. Synergies make cards interesting to play and classes fun to build the decks for. Their output of cards being allowed to speak to each other to meaningfully interact. But DK cards aren't allowed to talk to each other, and the cards therefore feel flatter, less vibrant. Worse, the cards are even being designed to be interesting, aren't even being designed to be interesting because they have to be generically powerful and direct the prop of their minuscule card pools. Interesting. The simple archetypes have their place, certainly, but I think a lot of players who bounce off the class would enjoy it if they got to play it with its full potential, and DK would become more interesting in nuanced class. Like, I agree with that sentiment. Like, I think DK would be a more fun class if it wasn't for the rune system. Now, would it be broken? I don't know. It probably would be broken because they balance it. They balance the class around the triple rune system, right? So it'd be kind of a lie to say that it wouldn't be broken. All right, part 4. What's this all for anyways? I spent a long time harping on the negative of runes, but there were corresponding positives that could balance it out. But as much as I generally try, I struggle to see what benefits they can give or give in the future. One of the most common ideas is that it is too unbalanced. The triple rune cards are so strong that letting a single deck access all of them across all 3 runes would be, yeah, like that's, yeah. I don't buy this at all. Wait, what? Are we afraid of players running Vampiric Blood, basically jazzed up Is plating, Bloodlust, and slightly overpush Blizzard in the same deck? Yeah? Are you guys? Yo, neat. Thanks for the sub, bro. And Miragard, thanks for the sub. I'm a little worried. I'm a little scared of it, if I'm gonna be honest. I genuinely don't see the problem if cards or synergies are too strong, they can be nerfed. I mean, that is a very fair sentiment to say. Yes, they can be nerfed, but in its current state, it'd be ridiculous. Yo, Added, thanks for the sub, bro. I appreciate it too, man. Thank you guys. Other classes have access to strong climactic cards without needing the rune system. Runes aren't protecting anyone from anything, and even if they were, the limitation imposed by them would not be worth it when there would be an alternative solution to properly balancing your cards. I mean, okay, this is completely fair, but I think like the logic behind it is just taking away what made Death Knight special, right? If you take away the rune system from Death Knight, what is interesting about the class anymore? The corpse system? I guess the corpse system's kind of fun. What time is it? Something else worth considering. Oh, he edited this. Something else worth considering is that DK's actual cool mechanic. I just brought this up. Already makes cards mutually exclusive in a naturalistic manner. It's difficult to run cards like Marigar alongside other heavily corpse spending cards like Corpse Explosion or Manipulate. I mean, that's a good point. Like, you don't want to run Marigar in a blood class, a blood rune deck, because you're already spending corpses to get rid of. You're already spending corpses, so that means your Marigar is worse. But like, I still think if I could run Marigar in my blood deck, I would. I think it'd be a pretty good, just like it would be good, right? One might say run more corpse generators. Now you have all of them, but those were two required deck slots. Some cards like Frostwind Fury probably would need to eat a nerf, but that seems like to be an easier task than working out how to make the rune system succeed. Okay, before I read even further, chat, would you guys say the rune system has succeeded or not? Like, would you say yes or no to that sentiment? What do you guys think? It's interesting. I don't think it failed. I don't think it's a failure at all. I think it's like a really interesting design for the class. It's cool. Will you be guessing legendary cards for Sunny? Is there new cards? I didn't even know. Oh, I don't know. Succeeded in what? Like, is it fun? Like, does Death Knight interest you as a class, chat? Does Death Knight interest you as a class? Like, when you guys saw what Death Knight was, did you guys like it? Were you like, oh shit, like that looks really exciting, I can't wait to play it? Or were you more like, it doesn't look as interesting as Demon Hunter? Remains to be seen. True. This is interesting discussion because it kind of relies on what you think it means to be a successful class. I mean, fair enough, right? Fair enough. Like, successful and like, is it fun for you is just subjective. Actually made me quit the game. Regal, you don't like Death Knight? I thought you would love it. Aren't you a Warcraft guy? I still haven't unlocked the class. Zero interest. Wow. Cthulhu, thanks for the sub, bro. I appreciate it, man. I hated Demon Hunter so much. Dude, listen, I hate Demon Hunter so much, dude. Don't worry. You're not by yourself. I think the class can suck lemons, if I'm going to be honest with you. It could suck lemons, dude. While Mr. Rarran clearly is a last-ditch effort on their part, same as the twist, it just feels desperate and half-baked. Oh my god, I actually like Twist, Regal. What the hell? I disagree with you on the twist, but I can understand. Yo, Piano Man, thanks for the sub, bro. I'm excited for Twist. I really am. I think that the current format for Twist is not going to be extremely interesting, but the future could be really, really good for it. I wish they started off with something more interesting, but we'll see. Okay. Sorry. It's also somewhat telling. Wait, did I read this? Yeah. It's also somewhat telling how easy runes would be to remove. Almost no reworking would be needed. Perhaps a small balance changes, and then they could just be like taken out of the game. There's a very small handful of cards, Froststrike, Hemitage, and Mortician, that refer to specific runes for their discover pools. I've never seen this card played. Is that the Unholy one? And those would be neat to change, would be easy to do though. It's not like Death Knight would have having flagship new mechanics stripped from it because corpses are an absolute great class mechanic. Yeah. Yo, Mirror, I think that's how you say that. Thanks for the sub, bro. I appreciate that. Thanks for subbing, guys. Sorry, where was I? And I'm sure people would love the more freedom to explore it. Given that this didn't get buried like I thought it would, I feel compelled to add here that I would definitely understate the work required to remove runes. There would be a meaningful balance changes that would be needed because Soul Stealer into Marigar into CNE does sound kind of disgusting. Yes. And these would impact what is one of the legitimate advantages of runes, that some players really like playing overtuned cards. And if they make the rest of their deck and class less interesting, okay, I can get behind that. I stand that by it'd be doable and worth it. Okay, chat, another interesting question for you guys. Do you think that Hearthstone is more fun when you play really gross cards? Like, do you have more fun playing with really broken stuff instead of just everything's on the same like balance? I hate power creep. Continue type back switch point giveaways for the command, bro. Depends. God damn it, chat. You guys are the worst. I guess that's fair though. The thing I don't like about DK is how it's still some of Warrior's control identity. Yeah, I've talked about that before. I've talked about it with the Warrior problem. As long as everybody has something broken. We don't need Guff for each class. You sure? You sure you don't need Guff for each class, chat? Come on, guys. Guff? Each class? It'd be Pongers. I, for one, love seeing 5 soul mirrors in a game. Okay, sorry, what was I saying? I read this guy. Maybe you think calling for the removal of runes is a bit drastic. Some people might say the class is young, give it more time. Hey, that's what I said. And then it would be fair to say things like that. Thank you. But let's imagine the coolest and most interesting stuff you can picture happening with the rune system in future sets. And I'd like you to tell me if that sounds better than just letting the cards talk to each other naturally. I heard a ton of arguments about how the rune system can end up in a decent spot or isn't necessarily going to always be this bad, but none of them have constituted meaningful arguments for what the runes actually add to everything and how they make things better. I think that that's because they don't and can't. They make things more complex on the surface, but not more deep or interesting. They shut options off rather than opening them up. They stun abilities to synergize with each other, and they build walls where they are not needed. They don't make Hearthstone or Death Knight more fun. Really interesting take here, chat. Really interesting take. Like, reading it, I understand where this person is coming from. I think like I am not interested in Death Knight at all. Like, it's one of the, when Death Knight came out, I was like, whatever, because it played like a bunch of different classes. So maybe they're right. Like, maybe if all the cards could talk to one another, the class would end up being more fun. And fun is basically the biggest thing for Hearthstone, right? People want to have fun. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of other classes are very successful, is just because you can just mismatch a bunch of stuff. I kind of understand, like, if I had to put like a frost rune to put like ice barrier in my deck, and that means I couldn't go into fireballs or something, like it would make for like less interesting mage decks. But I think the better way of doing it, like how, if I was going to change anything to Death Knight, I would do, hold on, let me go to wild cards. I would literally make it so that there is no such thing as triple blood cards. I think triple blood cards or triple rune cards are the problem. Like, I would rather have, for instance, like this card be weaker and be able to put into a frost deck. Because I think like more grain plus like a free synergy would be really, really cool, right? This card would obviously have to be nerfed, but if they did it with 2 blood instead of 3, it'd be interesting. There's a lot of like really interesting designs they can do here, but it ends up being like super weird because we don't know what the class would look like if they designed it in that way, right? It'd be kind of like a, I don't know. It is really interesting. It's an interesting thought process because it's also something that we've seen what happens with other classes that don't have a rune system over this long period of time, right? We haven't seen what happens in Death Knight from a year from now, right? To be fair, other classes dipping in other class identity has been going on for a bit. Druid does the armor mechanic better than Warrior, and Warrior has more armor cards. I mean, I think just Warrior's just in a weird spot, right? I have an idea. Let's make the cards take less runes, but it'll be less. Well, that's basically what I said, right? Let the effect be tied to a number of runes. Oh, that's really interesting. So like the more runes you put into, like the more runes you put into your deck, the stronger the card would be. So triple runes would be this, but like 2 blood runes would be like, I don't know, like 9 mana for 2 damage or something. I don't know, something along those lines. That'd be kind of sick, actually. That's a really good idea. Because then there's that, the only issue with that is like, then players would be more, it'd be like more, it'd take more brain power to build a deck, which is, I don't know if that's generally like a great idea, right? I could be very wrong about that. That's kind of neat.